Hi, I'm Adele Sheasley, a nervous system regulation specialist. Essentially what that means is I pull from several different modalities to help calm and reorganize the nervous system. Currently, I am the only MNRI core specialist here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm one of few Transforming Touch practitioners. I am also a nutritional therapy practitioner, and as you can see on my website, I have many other additional certifications and trainings that help me be a good family wellness navigator. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my main approach in working with children. But I wanted to first share how I got into this work was because of my children's challenges, particularly my son's. You can read both of my children's journeys on my website, but my son, the only diagnosis we ever got him was sensory processing disorder. However, they also had recommended me testing him for ADHD. Back then they were still using the term Asperger's, and then even bipolar at one point. As our OT gave up, didn't know what else to do, and I kept searching for information, I eventually came upon reflex integration, and that's when everything started to change for my children. Biomedical approach was also another very important part, but I will be focusing here today on sharing with you most about MNRI. Some of the areas that I assist with is anxiety, emotional regulation, attention and focus, learning challenges, work a lot with PANS-PANDAS, and other traumas such as TBIs, adoption, or birth traumas. And the reason why this work is so powerful is because we are working from the bottom up. Most approaches are working from the top down, trying to calm or create techniques or abilities that are at the high cortex. But the way we develop is from the brainstem. And if certain neural connections did not fully develop, then it's going to impede all of our abilities. So I'm going to be sharing today about my main modality, MNRI, that I use with children and how we do this. The process overall, I'll get a questionnaire. We'll set up a time to do an evaluation where I look directly at your child's reflexes. But a center point that I want you to keep in mind, the families that really see big change, especially accelerated change, are those that follow through with a home program. And I do teach you a beginning home program in that first appointment. We're talking 15 to 30 minutes potentially a day, and we can figure out how to work it into your lifestyle. But it takes repetition to change neural pathways. So please keep that in mind as you're learning about what we do. What is MNRI? Well, it stands for Moskotova. Dr. Moskotova is the person who developed this program, Neurosensory Motor Reflex Integration. Dr. Moskotova was originally from Russia, but she developed the program in Poland, and that's where the original institute is. And then we also have one here in Orlando, Florida. And it started out of a trauma of survivors of a train wreck. You can read the full story on the website, but it was the way kids responded to touch and movement in a time of high stress and pain that made her go down a path of how we develop, how those neural pathways and how the different sensory cells and other things affect our emotional regulation, focus, learning, and everything else. Why is this different from other reflex programs? Well, first of all, most other programs that do incorporate reflexes, they might address about 8 of these primary reflexes. In MNRI, we address 21 primary reflexes along with the lifelong reflexes and looking at various parts of the nervous system. It is really a fully comprehensive nervous system approach. So what are primary reflexes? Primary reflexes is the genetic coding that each of us have around the entire world that is the basis for the movement patterns we will do, which help grow the brain. It's the basis of our neural development, of how we grasp on to things. And then not only how we have that motor control, but how that grasp affects our memory, our ability for emotional regulation, and to coordinate our speech. So all of these reflexes have a physical, emotional, and a mental component to us. And if they don't fully integrate, then we don't have access to all of these abilities. So by making sure that these reflexes are fully integrated, which essentially just means matured, then we increase all of our abilities. And that's a great way to optimize them. They also, because reflexes have a protective component in them, if something happens, a reflex may act up in order to help us handle the moment. So sometimes stress and emotional factors are also stored in that memory and in that reflex. And so by working on the reflex, we help release that so it's no longer pulling us down. And this is the starting point for me working with children. The questionnaire is going to give me a good indication of what reflexes maybe need to be integrated. And then when I will take them through a series of movements and different types of touch to see how their body reacts, and that will tell me how something may or may not be integrated. So you can prep them for being prepared to do some different movements with me. Before going further into the different aspects of MNRI, I'm going to start by saying no tickling, please. Actually, how we assess some of these different reflexes is if we have a ticklish response to different touch in different places and in different directions. Believe it or not, after the age of 3, we really shouldn't be ticklish outside of our armpits and our groin. If we are ticklish still, it can be a sign of an unintegrated reflex or potential stored stress in the body. Number one, what I want you to think about is, what does the body do when it's tickled? It comes in to protect itself. So when we are tickling our children, we are telling the nervous system, yes, you need to stay hypervigilant and reactive and ready to protect yourself, keep these reflexes, in their more reactive state, because you have definite needs to be protected. Now, of course, most of the time, this started out of games and our want to connect with our children. And people often say, well, they laugh. Well, laughter is a way to disperse tension. Besides, then they've also grown up with the social cues, right? We start laughing while we're tickling our babies, and so then it's also a learned social cue. But some people will eventually trigger over into a panic attack or anxiety if it gets to be too much. And a lot of times when a child is yelling stop, their body is going into, overload. Keep in mind that these cells that pick up ticklishness are actually a type of pain receptor cell. They're meant for when that light, dangerous bug lands on us, for us to become aware and to protect yourself. So I encourage you to do gentle wrestling in order to have that hands-on connection time. And even if your child, sometimes they will ask to be tickled because they could be searching for that connection, or maybe they're actually searching for some more sensory input. For most people, not all, but most, deep pressure is calm and safe to the body. So doing gentle wrestling or some chasing with some wrestling, you'll do so much great sensory stuff, there. And that's a great physical way for you to connect with your body. And by not tickling, you'll help ensure that these reflexes integrate more quickly. The neural tactile techniques are extremely important for our children. First of all, we have 11 different sensory cells in the body. This helps us with our sensory regulation. And what we do is we use different types of touch to help activate and coordinate those sensory cells so the body can read the sensory environment more efficiently and effectively. If reflexes are off, the sensory system is off, and vice versa, because this is a way that the body helps stay scanning for danger to help make sure that we are truly staying safe. And bringing a sense of safety to the body is a central goal of MNRI. So we cannot get those reflexes to integrate if we don't also help those sensory cells communicate better. And we can have sensory dysregulation, but not be at the point of sensory processing disorder. It's just that our sensory system can be a little bit more on alert if those reflexes aren't integrated. And so it's a give and take for both sides. So we will always be working on increasing that sensory awareness while we are also working on integrating the reflexes. So as I mentioned, it brings a sense of safety in the body. It helps a lot with proprioception. And proprioception is understanding where our body is safe. And then there's something called interoception, which is internally understanding how we are connected. And if we don't have that sense, our body, again, can't feel completely safe moving through the world. So that is our big focus of areas when we use the neurotactile techniques with children. If we don't integrate our visual and auditory reflexes and work directly with those systems, then we can't guarantee that we will fully integrate and stay integrated, because our visual system takes in more sensory information than all of our senses combined. And in today's world, our brain is way over inundated, both visually and auditorily. Please take away, dramatically reduce those handheld screens. Our visual system does not finish integrating until about the age of 8. Our eyes were not made to do repetitive close-up movements, as now that is so often being demanded with the level of reading schools are expecting from our children younger and younger. And now kids are growing up with putting these devices, shortening their visual system, teaching the brain that we only pay attention when something is close by and dancing in front of us. And we're wondering, why are they having a hard time paying attention to the teacher who's up there? Because their brain is used to things being here and having it to be overstimulated in order to keep the attention. And what's happening with this is like we're putting blinders, on, because they're losing more and more of the peripheral vision. And our peripheral vision is a very important part to our body feeling safe and aware of what is going on around us. So please really consider your family's screen usage. And then what I'm looking at here with the visual and auditory systems, specifically with the visual, is not the acuity, but how well can our eyes coordinate their movement? Can they keep that endurance up? And what we do differently in MNRI compared to other visual programs specifically is we work directly with the cranial nerves. So we're not just asking the brain to do a bunch of tracking and eye push-ups that it doesn't have the neurological wiring for. Otherwise, it would be able to do it already. So we work directly with the cranial nerves to help them communicate more efficiently between the brain, and these cranial nerves affect both vision and auditory system so that they can properly discriminate between all of the information they're getting. Because the brain should be able to shut certain sounds out and zone in on other areas. But more and more of our children are losing those abilities too. So auditory visual stuff is something that we usually jump on pretty quickly because it's such a vital component to our development. I often will do the MNRI trauma protocol with kids, even if they haven't had a quote-unquote trauma, if they're highly anxious, because that means their fear paralysis, their moral reflexes are in a very hyper state, and working through the trauma code, because that creates chronic stress, and chronic stress is equal to a trauma in our body. Now, there are other things to think about with traumas, and sometimes we don't put it into perspective. What was their birth like? There could be a trauma there. Was there separation from any of their caregivers in those early times, or just high stress in the household for who knows what reasons? Parent illnesses, deaths in the family, things like that the young nervous system is not able to cope with well and sets into the body as a trauma. So it doesn't have to be a specific big T trauma. Adoption would be an automatic trauma because our nervous system has been separated from its origin, and it knows, that. So depending on the age of the child will depend on and what other work has been done, whether I will jump in and do the full protocol or if I will work through it more incrementally. The younger they are, like 2 or below, more likely I will jump in and just go ahead and do the full trauma protocol. Have seen beautiful things for babies with fail to thrive. We've had great improvements in eating typically, even after just one trauma session. And also I will often do it if they've been working with another practitioner for a while and have gotten some basic, regulation where maybe I'll go ahead and do the full trauma protocol. But with an older child and depending on what the history is, I might work it through more incrementally because sometimes when we're doing these protocols, we can have a kind of like a detox or a reorganization, reaction. And so that could be someone is more crabby, agitated, emotional, something along those lines. And I want to make sure that that release isn't also a big stressor in itself. But that is something that will determine as I get to know your child and their story. So I also do a rebirthing protocol. As I mentioned, there can be a birth trauma. So a child born with a cord around the neck had to use a vacuum. Maybe it was a super fast or a very prolonged labor. Then there's, of course, a C-section. So if we're C-section, then the nervous system is actually missing out on a bunch of the different input that would help trigger different neural development pathways through that process. So that also it would be another trauma. Of course, if we're born with a cord around the neck, that's being born trying to survive. So what we do is we take a person through the reorder of the reflexes that actually move us down the birth canal. There is a specific order meant for bringing us down, and we're trying to replicate that as closely as we can and as smoothly as possible. It's kind of important that once I start that protocol, that is one that's done all at once, because if we don't finish it, it's again like having a C-section. So it's really beautiful how it resets the nervous system. I love this story about this 2.5-year-old where he was tearing up my office while I was working on one of his older brothers. And when I got to talking to the mom, what are her big challenges was that even at his young age, I had to keep moving the locks up because he kept escaping out of the house. And as I started asking more questions, I found out during his birth that he couldn't properly descend. He kept kind of bouncing up off of her pelvis. So it's like his body's afraid of being trapped. It's always trying to get out still. So I said, before we even actually evaluate him, let's just start with a rebirthing session. She came back a couple hours for her own appointment after we rebirthed him and said that when they got in the car, they had their weekly phone call with Grandma, and the first thing he said was, "I'm safe now. Mommy will take care of me." And when they got home, usually, I guess, diaper changes were like a 20-minute wrestling match. And when she said, "I need to change your diaper," he says, "Should I lay down here?" And he, at that point, had shown no interest in potty training. I did give her a couple spinal reflexes to start with at that time, and he actually was potty trained within a month and came into my office like a different kid, just playing nicely while waiting for his turn or for his sibling. We still had reflexes to work, and it did take us a while to work through his fear paralysis reflex, but we had that much change with just one rebirthing. So that's just a phenomenal example of how it affects our behavior, the way we move through the world. It affects our learning abilities, and it is a part of our attachment style, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. The amenorrhea basal ganglia, parents usually really love what they see from this because it plays such a big factor in our emotional regulation. It does play a factor throughout our whole lives in motor control. It's big for executive functioning. So if it is under functioning, it can affect our attention, our focus, our setting goals and our follow through. When it is overstimulated, it has a lot to do with emotional regulation, anxiety, OCD. And this is the area that they believe is most affected by PANS and PANDAS. So this is definitely a protocol I focus on with those with the PANS and PANDAS diagnosis. But overall, between the ages of 2 and 4, we are going through huge neurodevelopmental leaps. And there are 7 different emotional stages that we are working through. And if for whatever reason, high stress or something else, we don't finish going through one of these stages, we can kind of get stuck in those more immature behavior patterns. So I have what I call the global basal ganglia protocol that I do a few times, and then it will depend again on the person whether I'm going to just start and go through each of those 7 different stages or if I'm picking them out. But this is really neat for making big impacts on that anxiety and emotional regulation. Now, there is way more to MNRI than what I just went over. I've just highlighted the typical order, kind of direction that I work with children and some of those highlights, but there's a lot more to bring in. It's just such a comprehensive nervous system approach. However, I also will often bring in transforming touch to help with better co-regulation and healing what are called attachment wounds. During the first 3 years of our lives, how our nervous system learns to regulate is off of our caregiver's nervous system. And so you don't have to give to your children's nervous system what you weren't given. This is really a transgenerational trauma, and it's a rare person who had really well-regulated caregivers that have what we call secure attachment. And our attachment style, which tends to either be more either anxious or avoidant, greatly affects that emotional regulation and how we interact and handle relationships. And all of this happens during the first few years of our lives non-verbally. It's just what our children are picking up from our nervous system. How stressed, were we? What events did we happen? What were they separated from us at all? And beyond that, just what was our nervous system regulation from our family's history before they came along. These things are going to affect their attachment, their nervous system regulation, and transforming touch is one way to help connect that. And I find it does it more effectively than MNRI. MNRI is really focused on very specific neural pathways, and transforming touch helps really bring in that global co-regulation that then helps us find that self-regulation within ourselves, so we're not thrown off by someone else who's so dysregulated. Now, with this, I do usually ask parents, at least one, to do some transforming touch before I start doing it with the children, because if they're then going home to the same dysregulation within their parents, it's just not going to hold as well. So it is much more effective if we get the parents involved. And that's why we need to consider that our children cannot be more regulated than we are. That when we're looking to help our children get regulated, it's really part of the family's nervous system. Our nervous system needs to be leading the way. It's not just all on them and quote unquote fixing them, then we'll all be okay. Our bodies, our nervous system really needs to be the leader in that. However, let me just expand upon transforming touch is a very simple technique and not one that I can give a home program for. Just like when I learned about this, I could not do transforming touch on my own children because I was one of the nervous systems that they dysregulated off of. So we need to bring someone else in to provide this so that they can learn about consistency from that practitioner's nervous system. Because what we're doing is just holding very specific spots while staying centered. I, as a practitioner, the child can be playing and moving around. They don't have to be perfectly still. But what they're getting from my nervous system is consistency, because I will hold these specific spots all for the same amount of time. So they learn predictability. And that is a big thing that our nervous system didn't get enough of, was of predictable input. So we decide at one point I might, bring this in. It's easy for me to add it into my time with them. I can do both MNRI and transforming touch, but just as I mentioned, it is, I think, much more effective when the parents get involved. So another service that I like to offer is that of a family wellness navigator. Essentially, this is helping you to analyze and coach through what are all the different things that everybody in the family is dealing with. What therapies are you doing? What is the lifestyle, like, and help you develop a plan and prioritize. Because unfortunately, all of us typically need more support than just one modality. There's no magic bullet that is going to do it all. And all parts of our life affect our nervous system regulation. So what I do is I will collect information about all the individuals in your family or goals, what you're currently, doing, and we will help prioritize, come up with specific things to work on, and then depending on the situation, maybe review those things about every 6 weeks. Some people decide they need more regular support, and others, that's giving them time to work on these things, and then we come back and we figure out what we need to tweak or when we're ready to move on to the next step. A lot of times parents are trying to decide between what other therapies to add in for whether it's themselves and or the children, and we can discuss what kind of results you're seeing from the various modalities. And I'm talking about modalities beyond just what I, offer, and what might be a good fit for your family. So that's an additional thing that we can set time aside to do. It's pretty easy to get started. You would send me an email with your child's name and birth date. We would then decide on an evaluation date, which that one I do need a child, in for. I will send you forms, and based upon those questionnaires, I will develop a home program. As I mentioned, when you bring your child in, I will then take them through a series of movements, and then we will learn the home program from there. If you happen to not be local, I can still support you. There will be some limitations. I cannot do the evaluation virtually. However, those questionnaires really give me a good picture of things. There'll just be little nuances that maybe I won't have. And I can teach you a home program to do. Now, there's certain things I can't teach you to do, like the trauma or the rebirthing. Sometimes people are close enough that they will come in a special day. We'll create extra time, for that, so that we can, do that extra work along with some other things. But I work with people all over the world, I guess I have, developing those home programs, and we can really make a lot of progress. So all you need to do is send me an email for us to look at getting started. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. I really believe the more you understand, the more you're going to put into it, and the more you're going to get out of it. Like I said, the families that really see fast and steady movement for their children are those that get involved with the home program. Now, people do still get results by coming in regularly, but obviously then I say we're really extending the journey. Don't hesitate with any questions, and I look forward to supporting you and your family soon.